going to be such a weird intro. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Hello, and welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Ethan.
Okay, Ethan, are you ready for a wild ride?
I mean, I suppose. Let me strap in.
Okay, so I have a little bit of trivia about a show called All in the Family. And because, while this is not exactly MASH related, it's a sitcom of the same era, so I figured you'd appreciate this. So, for our listeners who don't know, All in the Family was a 1970s sitcom. It had some really crazy, problematic aspects of it, but it also was very progressive almost for the subject matters that it handled, very much like MASH. So, All in the Family had this crazy extended universe, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. So, it spawned a bunch of spin-offs, and a lot of them were really successful. So, have you ever heard of this show called Maude?
Yes, I've heard of Maude. I don't know what Maude is. Like, I've heard of All in the Family. I could not tell you what All in the Family is either. I've just seen them at the piano playing the song because that's what Family Guy references for their intro. So I've seen that, but my knowledge of All in the Family is literally nothing. So continue with your ride.
So Maude is the titular character of the show, and she's played by Bea Arthur, who, by the way, was also Dorothy from The Golden Girls, so amazing.
A true queen.
Yes! Maude, I found out, is supposed to be in-universe Edith Bunker's cousin. So I was like, oh, that's really cool. So Maude then spawned the sitcom Good Times, which was another, like, crazy kind of progressive show for the time period. And the main character, Florida Evans, was first introduced in Maude as the maid. And so then another sitcom, The Jeffersons, was also a spin-off of All in the Family, and it ran longer than All in the Family. It ran 11 seasons to All in the Family's 9 seasons. And to tie this back to MASH, it was all on CBS during the 1970s.
So what you're saying is All in the Family was the first cinematic universe.
I would say so, yeah. I would honestly say so.
That's very interesting. I know the Jeffersons as well. I think I've seen a few episodes of the Jeffersons actually, because they have a very famous theme song, which I just remember being in my head as a kid. Maybe it was on Nick at Night or something like that. But I love a shared universe. What can I say? I'm a simple man. You show me one thing, you connect it to another thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so I just thought that any of our old sitcom fanatics out there would like to know that CBS was great at doing extended universes and progressive sitcoms, apparently.
And, in theory, MASH is in any universe where the Korean War happened.
That's very true. I like that. I like to think that MASH just exists in every universe.
Hawkeye is canon to every universe except the real one. Well, even the real one, because it's based on a true story novel, right? Like, it's a biography. So there is a Hawkeye out there.
MASH is just canon in real life.
That is maybe the dorkiest sentence you've ever said.
Okay, so let's get into the episode.
Yes, please.
So in this episode, entitled Ceasefire, everyone takes rumor as fact and believes that the war is ending. They celebrate, they're saying their goodbyes, and they even burn a few bridges along the way, which is very comical. But unfortunately, because this is only episode 23 of an 11-season show, we all know that the fun probably can't last. So, Ethan, what did you think about this episode?
I like this one a lot. Like, this was a really fun one for me, and it was a very sad one for me. We'll get into why I thought it was sad a little later on, but I'm surprised that this wasn't the season finale. Like, it's just kind of odd to me that they did this as the penultimate episode, I guess you'd say, the one before the finale. when this feels so much like the story that you would do as the final episode of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely had season finale vibes. I enjoyed this episode. I didn't think it was like groundbreaking or anything, but I did like it. But you're right, it definitely felt like the end of a season. If it ended this way, it would have been pretty good, I think.
Like, I don't know how, like, watching TV really kind of worked in the 70s. Because I am so, like, raised on, like, having IMDb at my fingertips when I can just look up, all the episodes of a given season. And I can know, like, oh, well, episode 16 just aired this week, and now I know that there's 24 episodes in the whole season. But I don't know if, like, in the 70s, you had that knowledge, like, if you knew that a new MASH would be on the week after this one, or if you thought, like, oh, well, this probably was the season finale.
I wonder, I know that we kind of ragged on TV Guide a couple of episodes ago, but I wonder how big of a resource TV Guide kind of was at that point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To, like, really know when a season's ending, if there's another episode coming, if you should expect that this is, like, gonna be the last episode. I think that maybe we should interview somebody who was alive during the 70s to kind of have them to let us understand, like, what was going through everyone's mind when this first aired.
Yeah, if you grew up watching MASH, email us and tell us how kind of watching episodes worked. We'd love to hear from you. And if you don't mind, we'll talk about that on the show.
So let's get into kind of the plot of the episode a little bit more. Right off the bat, this episode, you knew it was going to kind of be chaotic, because in the scene where it's kind of revealed that there's a ceasefire, Henry says to Hawkeye and Trapper, who are in the office when he finds out the news, don't tell anybody, keep this under wraps, this is just a rumor. And then immediately Radar bursts in with basically the whole camp and is like, oh yay, we're having a ceasefire, the war is gonna be over.
Yeah, the entire camp immediately upon hearing, like, the slightest implication is like, all right, well, we're done. We're going home. Which, as we learned in this episode, maybe you shouldn't do. But I did like how everyone immediately is like, thank God, like, having the time of their life. Hawkeye grabs the phone from Henry and tells General Barker, I think it was. I'm not sure which general. Or Clayton?
Was this General Clayton?
Because there are two generals, right? It's Barker and Clayton, and they switch out.
I think it's Clayton.
Hawkeye tells Clayton, or whoever, that he wants to have their baby, which I thought was insane. I was like, wow, that's a crazy thing to hear being said.
That's so Hawkeye, but also I feel like he would not say that to a general unless it was like, okay, the war's over. I can say, I can have even less of a filter.
Like we said, he does kind of burn a few bridges in this one. But just the, like, Clayton, let me have your baby, like, twice is, for, like, a 70s show, I thought that was kind of extreme. I was like, whoa, that's probably pushing a boundary there.
I did think it was really interesting how in this episode they kind of showed everybody's reactions to it a little bit differently and how everyone was kind of handling the news. The biggest aspect of that was Trapper not really believing that the ceasefire was going to happen. Even right off the bat in Henry's office, he's sitting there and he's saying, I just don't know about this. I just don't know about this. And I thought that was really kind of cool for Trapper's character, because I feel like Hawkeye would maybe be the skeptic and, like, the cynic a little bit more than Trapper. And I thought that was very interesting that Trapper took on that role of being very skeptical of the ceasefire.
Yeah, I love Trapper. I really do. I think he's an excellent character. But especially kind of early on, there isn't that much separating him and Hawkeye. Like, they are kind of two halves of the same guy. Like, they aren't really distinct from one another in a lot of ways. But this is, you can see that he is different. He does think different. He's not always going along with Hawkeye. That he's like, he has the cynical side. And like you said, that's very interesting, because you'd assume that Hawkeye, being the main character, would be the one that's more world weary. But I really like how Trapper is characterizing this. It kind of gives him a bit more dimensionality than we've seen so far.
Yeah, definitely. And throughout this episode, like, the whole main plot is kind of just how everyone is celebrating and dealing with this ceasefire in their own ways. So what I thought was really funny was when Klinger found out that there was going to be a ceasefire, he was like, oh no, like his biggest issue was like, oh no, I have all these dresses that I don't know what to do with now. So he has this ceasefire sale, he says,
which is
and he starts
so
giving
funny.
away the dresses.
A ceasefire sale is the funniest joke I've ever heard.
Why didn't they title the episode Ceasefire Sale?
They should have. That's so funny. Stupid puns like that just get me going. I'm like, yes, more of that, please. I love how everyone kind of reacted differently. Kind of get like running things throughout it. You get, Frank and Margaret kind of breaking up, and that was kind of interestingly handled. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But I really liked how Radar was treating it like high school graduation, where he had the yearbook or scrapbook, and he was taking it around to everybody. I was like, sign my scrapbook. And it was just a good reminder of how young he is, that he is the kid of the group, that he's, supposed to be a teenager, I think, still. And I liked how he was just going around sign my yearbook.
It was really sweet. The one that really got me, of course, and there was kind of an extended scene on this, was when Radar was in Henry's tent and he asked Henry if he had the opportunity to sign his scrapbook yet. And it was so sweet how what Henry said, which was very, very simple, of I wish you the best, your friend Henry Blake, stuff like that. You could see that it really affected Radar, and he really, really took those words to heart. And I thought that was so endearing and heartfelt.
Okay. So I'm going to fight you on this, because normally we kind of cut this stuff out. But I can't dance around it in this one. Henry leaves the show later on. He meets an unfortunate end. Let's just say that. And this episode, he's talking about how he's excited to go back to his kids and his wife, and excited to deal with his mortgage and everything. And it just made me so sad, because I know that Henry doesn't get to do that. I know that he doesn't get to go home and live a mundane life. Obviously, when this aired, you didn't know that, and I'm sure it was not on the writers' minds to imply this bleak ending. But when you watch it with retrospect, you're like, oh no, Henry, buddy, I just want to give you a hug, because you're not going to be able to live that fun, mundane life.
Oh my god, Ethan, that's so sad. I literally wasn't even thinking that.
Oh no.
I take these episodes just trying to take them very episodically, and I'm going to contradict myself a little bit right now, because that is terribly sad, and I can't believe that you were the one to bring up the downside of something, because that's usually my job. But well,
you bring up the real world sadness. I bring up the lore sadness,
the in-universe sadness. I will say though, I did think it was kind of sad that Henry was kind of giving Radar the brush off a little bit, because Henry clearly has a life to go back to, and Radar kind of doesn't want to lose his connections that he's made there, because, this is his first real venture into adulthood, and he doesn't have much to go back to when he goes home. So this is kind of explored a little bit more in depth in the later part of the series, but it's really nice to see this continuity in Radar's character, and it kind of gives him a little bit more depth, and just you get more of a sense of Radar's character, why he feels like Henry is his father figure and whatnot. And I really like that part of it, kind of going and knowing what's going to happen in later parts of the show, and what's more explored about these characters later on. It gives it this little bit of context that if you just didn't know, you wouldn't catch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you, that they always do see each other as father and son, and that's very explicit in this Like, they straight up say it, and they say it at the same time that they see each other as father and son, which is very cute. But yeah, with those lines, I did think it was odd that Henry was giving Radar the cold shoulder when he said, "We'll get lunch together," in the way that you say, "We'll get lunch together," and then you never get lunch together. Knowing that they do genuinely care for each other was just a little bit odd, but it also made sense because, like, Henry's an adult man with a family, and Radar is, you know, in universe, a 19-year-old who's, like, very naive. Like, they're not probably going to hang out in the real world.
Yeah, of course.
But this whole scene was probably the highlight of the episode because it's just, you know, it's very human and it gives the characters a lot of, like, depth to them, whereas, like, this felt like a very real interaction.
Yeah, I really liked this part until you mentioned that there's this underlying sadness to it. No, I don't like it as much. Let's get into some more of the comedy aspect of the episode.
That would be nice.
I thought it was really funny when Hawkeye is kind of having these final dates with the nurses, and they are all telling him, like, you know, we have to make plans for the future and when we leave the war. And he lies to them and tells them, "Oh, I've been married this whole time. Sorry, we can't make future plans."
The only woman I recognize here was Cutler. Like, she's the only one that I think, like, had a name. And I think the blonde girl that's the first one is in other episodes, but, like, she's just very throwaway. But this whole bit of, like, his get out of jail free card is like, "I'm married." But he always says it while they're still on a date with each other. Like, not at the end, like, just kind of in the middle. So he always ruins their date so that, like, they storm out of it. Which I thought was, like, a funny thing for him to consistently screw up on. You should time that better if you want to have, like, a fun last date. But no, he's gotta ruin it for himself.
I thought it was so mean, too, that he was kind of suggesting to all these nurses that, oh, yeah, we have a future together. And then comes about that, no, actually, we don't, because I'm fake married. One thing. Did you catch...
They mentioned Vermont again?
Yes! When Hawkeye's on the first date with the first blonde nurse, he suggests that he's married, she asks if he has kids, and he says 5. And she's shocked. And Hawkeye goes, "Oh, it's cold in Vermont." And it's getting me thinking, is Hawkeye supposed to live in Vermont? Like, is that where he's supposed to be from? And we've just dreamed Crabapple Cove, Maine all this time? I just am so confused.
It's what we call a retcon. I think I mentioned that the first time that Hawkeye was meant to be from Vermont. But at this point, the continuity error is that he's from Maine. You know, like, that's not something that's established.
Is it, though?
I don't think they mentioned Maine at all in season 1.
Yeah, I'm just, like, I'm so confused. I'm literally so confused about this.
That's so funny.
I'm flabbergasted because not anything against Vermont. I love Vermont and I love Maine, but I'm just like, what the hell? What the heck?
That's so funny. As soon as he said Vermont, I, like... You know that gif of the guy, like, doing math in his head and all the numbers are, like, around him? I immediately did that, where it was like, wait a second, is the Maine the continuity error, or is the Vermont a continuity error? Because I remember you, like, freaking out about it, so it was like, wait a minute, what's wrong here?
What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, it'll be interesting, because not to keep going on about this, but I think it'll be interesting to kind of get that confirmation later on in this series where either he is from Maine or he's vacationing in Maine or he has a vacation home in Maine or something like that. So I can't wait until we get there.
It's probably going to be nothing.
I know, but this is something that I need cleared up. Anyway.
But with this date thing, I love Hawkeye a lot. He's like one of my... I think, favorite TV leads of all time. I'm just gonna say it. I love Alan Alda in this role. I think he's such, like, a charming guy, but he is just, like, an absolute dog of a man.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a man that you, like, want a long-term relationship in your life at this point in his character development. So, like, yeah, it totally makes sense why he is like, oh, by the way, I'm married, to get you away from me as soon as, like, a hard no.
Yeah, it was kind of mean. I didn't like it, but also it was very Hawkeye. It was very
Yeah.
first season Hawkeye, you know what I mean?
In character, but also you're like,
For
that
sure.
ain't like a good real world thing to
That's
do.
mean. Also, I have to mention we get Hojan in this episode, and this is actually his last episode that he's ever in. So originally I was gonna say, why isn't Hojan in college? Wasn't he supposed to go to college already? And then I realized that this is the last episode that he's in, so I guess after he goes to college. But I thought that it was really, really sweet that he wanted like memorabilia or something from the swamp because he just enjoyed his time being with Hawkeye and Trapper so much. I thought that was just so sweet.
Yeah. I love seeing Hojan. I know that we were like, why is that boy not in college? But every time this actor showed up, every time this character appeared, I don't know, he's just got like a good vibe to him.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, every time you see him, he's like, oh, this is a good guy.
Yeah, I liked his character a lot.
And I'm kind of sad this is his last appearance, but also in headcanon, you're like, well, he's in the States now. He's getting an education, so good for him.
We always want the best for Hojan.
Yeah. Hojan, write us from college. Come on, you can do it.
So this would not be an episode without me ragging on Frank, right? So do you want to talk about Frank and Margaret's little like breakup tryst kind of thing? I don't really know what to call it.
Yeah, this was very interesting for me because I never like how they characterize Margaret as like falling over herself for Frank, but also I thought some of this was like genuinely pretty funny when she's just like fully breaking down. Like, okay, so Frank and Margaret are of course saying goodbye to each other, and Frank is married, so they, unlike Hawkeye and all these girls, truly have no room for being in a relationship after the war, at least by the standards of being a married man in the 1950s. They cannot be openly together. So it's all them trying to have their last date and kind of having to deal with, like, truly saying goodbye. And it eventually comes to Margaret is just completely breaking down, and what I thought was funny was like, oh, I'll learn to live with your wife. I could be your nurse. I could be your patient. I could do this. I could do that. Please. Just her performance of it, I thought was genuinely very funny. I liked how Loretta Swit performed this part. I thought it was genuinely well done.
Yeah, I really liked, I mean, I didn't like this part because, you know, I don't like the idea that Margaret and Frank are in an adulterous relationship and all that kind of stuff, and that Margaret would commit suicide without Frank.
I missed that part.
Did you not get that part? Okay, so in the episode, it's kind of interspliced into the rest of the scenes. As it goes on, they're periodically getting drunker and drunker and drunker, and the last scene with them in Margaret's tent, Margaret says something along the lines of, oh, you don't have to worry about me, I'll be dead. And Frank's like, wait, what?
No, I completely...
You didn't
I missed that part.
She says, oh, I'll just stick my head in the oven and it'll be over quick. And that's when then Frank kind of like pulls her up and is like, oh no, don't do that. And that's when she says, oh, take me home with you. Like, I'll be your nurse. I'll be your patient. I'll be your whatever. Your wife will learn to love me. I can't believe you didn't get that part.
I swear to God, unlike last episode where I checked out and completely missed all the funny ending bits, I was fully paying attention to this one. I have no idea where I was. Maybe I was like writing down a different line or whatever for a note. I don't know where I was for the Margaret suicide bit, because that makes this whole thing way less funny. I'll be real. It makes the funny haha of her wanting to be his nurse or his patient way less funny when she's like, by the way, if you break up with me, I'm gonna die. so sad. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I can't believe you missed that. That's
again,
that's my only comment.
Very bad podcaster, as it turns out. Just take the job away from me. Hire a different host. Someone who actually pays attention to the show.
Eventually, we get everybody into the mess tent for this final goodbye party. And you have the general there, and you get this idea that it might actually be, starting to happen. You see on Trapper's face that he is starting to maybe believe that there will actually be a ceasefire. Because, it's a party, right? So everyone's laughing and having a good time. The war is supposedly going to be over and whatnot. And I really liked this scene of just everybody kind of coming together, kind of just for that one last hurrah. But of course, Hawkeye has to kind of ruin it. And he puts on this slideshow of pictures of General Clayton when he's come to the camp. And he and Margaret are kind of like kissing and hugging and stuff in a Jeep. And that just felt really creepy to me. I was like, why are you photographing this guy and this nurse that you work with all the time? Like, why are you photographing them together? That's so exploitative and kind of gross.
Because Hawkeye is a dog. We've gone over this. He's not a good person, but he's a very charming person, so it works out. Yeah, this whole bit was kind of odd. Like, I understand. I didn't really have the, like, weird voyeurism bit that you felt. I was just like, oh, this is an inappropriate thing to show at, like, a going away party. And this is Hawkeye, like, burning the military bridge. But, you know, I understand where you're coming from now.
I definitely feel like this was Hawkeye's last hurrah, of course, of being like, I am not dealing with the military and rank and stuff like that anymore. So I have literally nothing to lose. And this is why he did that. And even General Clayton says, oh, Pierce, if there wasn't a ceasefire going on, it's kind of suggesting like he would be in a lot of trouble if he showed these pictures and there wasn't a ceasefire. But yeah, it was not surprising, but I was just like, wow, of course. Like, of course we get this.
I'm just kind of surprised that, I mean, I guess it's been implied in other episodes, but I thought that Margaret and General Clayton's relationship was a little more on the down low. I didn't think that it was, like, so well known to Hawkeye that he would broadcast pictures of it to the camp as if, like, it was just common knowledge, you know?
Well, like we said, this is Hawkeye's last chance to, like, humiliate Margaret and kind of also humiliate Frank, because Margaret is, like, kind of cheating on Frank with General Clayton. Yeah, it's a whole situation. That's she gets around. That's crazy.
She, she does, and we can't shame her for it. It's fine. Frank is obviously like, my word, even though that he is also cheating, so, like, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. But I thought Margaret's response to it was very funny, where she was just like, he's a close family friend. That's kind of insane. That's a weird justification, Margaret. I don't think that makes the situation better. So, after Hawkeye makes it absolutely clear that he is completely done with this place, including tearing up his poker IOUs, which apparently equals to like $1,500 or something, it's revealed that the ceasefire is not happening, and immediately everyone is like, all right, back to work. And it was kind of... How do you feel about this?
It happened really quickly. The most of the episode was just kind of everyone dealing with the ceasefire and dealing with the ramifications of the war being over. And then when we found out that that wasn't going to happen, it immediately, there were choppers on the way. So everyone kind of had to get back into surgery. And yeah, then the episode was just kind of over. So I didn't really have time to take in that, oh no, all these characters were, celebrating for nothing. It felt kind of sad, and it felt really like, almost, but no one seemed as sad and upset as you would think they would be. You know what I mean?
This made me sad, because again, looking at the show as a whole, you're like, well, I know that in, like, their world, in universe, they're not there for 11 years because it's longer than the real Korean War. But I'm just like, oh my god, they thought they were done, and they have 11 more years to go. Like, the war is so far from over. They're literally stuck there for so long. It made me, like, existentially sad, where I'm like, oh, buddies, you have no idea what's coming for you. You've got such a long road ahead of you. And yeah, they didn't like overly react, which I think is realistic. If you're working on a military base, you're gonna be like, yeah, okay. And I thought that was pretty realistic.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that you get that one scene of Hawkeye, like the close-up of Hawkeye, and he looks just really, really disappointed.
Great
and
acting
great
from
facial
Alan
acting from Alan Alda, of course. Yes, of course. And yeah, that was basically it. And I do agree that it seems realistic because you kind of have to account for that when it comes to you being in a war, that there's going to be potential ceasefires all the time before there is actually the ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think the show might deal with that later on. I could definitely be wrong, but I do think the show deals with potential ceasefires a couple more times later on.
And again, they're there for so long, it would be weird if this was the only ceasefire ever brought up. Like, it wouldn't even feel like they were recycling the same thing. It would feel like a very just, like, honest thing of like, well, maybe it's over this time, and then it's not. And you're like, well, great. Here we go again. This show's so sad, man. I love this show, but when you think about it, you're like, well, this is a sad show about a bunch of people who are in a war they shouldn't be in a medical base that they don't want to be at.
Speaking of that, I do want to, before we wrap up, I want to talk about one final scene that was in the kind of middle of the episode. And before this last scene where they find out that there's not going to be a ceasefire, it's kind of the only really, like, downtrodden scene where Father Mulcahy stops everybody and kind of stops the audience too and says, you know, let's pray for the people who we lost. And I think that was just such a great scene. It was really quick because I don't think they wanted to really take away from the festivities and happiness of the rest of the episode until the final scene. But it was kind of letting everyone know, you know, yes, we're all happy and we can be happy that the war is over, but remember that there are people here, or there are people who are not here to celebrate with us. And that is really the whole tragedy and crux. And we should be excited, but also remember that there are people who passed away.
Father Mulcahy was so good in this episode. He's only in, like, a scene or two, but his bits were, like, genuinely just so good. I think William Christopher is his name, right? His performance as Father Mulcahy, like, wasn't, you know, a showy part, but I think he just portrays this character, this, like, man of God, very well, where he's, like, just so earnest and, like, loving. I love this scene with him. Thank you for bringing it up, because I almost completely forgot about it. But the scene's definitely a highlight of the episode for me.
Are there any other scenes that we didn't talk about that you really liked, or any other one-liners? Because I don't have much trivia for this episode, except the fact that Hojon is no longer seen.
Well, in the beginning, like the first scene before they announce the ceasefire, they're in the OR, and they've been there for 3 days. And Henry says to, I think, Hawkeye and Frank, as usual, because they're always squabbling, he says, like, quit beefing, you two. And, like, they said beefing back in the 50s/70s? I didn't know that. That line caught me really off guard.
What's so funny is that when you watch old shows like MASH, or older shows, and you realize that every kind of saying or anything from our generation is just recycled from previous generations.
It's true. I legit thought that beefing was a thing that started in, like, the 90s. Like, I had no idea that, like, it goes back so far. There are other lines that I liked, but, like, that was the one that, like, I felt like I had to bring up on the show, because it caught me so off guard.
That's so funny.
What about you? Do you have any favorite lines?
So this is kind of not funny, but it's pretty serious. When Trapper and Hawkeye are in the swamp, and Trapper says to Hawkeye, I don't believe it. We didn't even talk about this, but they make a bet that the ceasefire isn't going to happen. And this is when they're making the bet. And Hawkeye is saying to Trapper, how could you be so down and upset? Like, there's probably going to be this ceasefire. He starts to say, there's not going to be any more war. There's not going to be any more fighting. And he says this one line of, no more putting kids back together so that they can die at a more convenient time. And I was kind of taken aback by that line of just, wow, that is so hard hitting. And that is kind of what they're doing, unfortunately. And it really impacted me. Like, I felt it in my chest when he said it, and he delivered it so like nonchalantly almost. And it was such a hard line. That was such a standout moment for me.
Yeah. Now I feel dumb for mentioning the beefing line, because I did make note of that. But I was like, no, beefing's what's important here. Yeah, I think the show's really good at hitting you with these really dramatic lines that are delivered very casually and very, like, honestly, where you're not thinking that's, like, a melodramatic state. Like, what that line is very melodramatic, but it just feels so honest about what surgery in war, like, is, that I think I've said this before, but there are some lines in the show that, like, if you saw in the, like, the beginning of a book, like the epitaph, and it was just, like, written out, and it was, like, attributed to Hawkeye or, like, Henry Blake or whatever, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's a real quote that, like, a real man said, and not, like, a one-liner from a comedy TV show.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought that this episode was fun with so much underlying sadness. I thought it was a really good episode. Very much season finale vibes, but
yeah,
I'm excited to watch this next one.
It's weird that this one isn't the season finale. I honestly have no idea what the season finale story is going to be. I hope that it's something either, like, just very light and very fun and, like, nails the comedy, or it's something that's, like, kind of hard hitting. I don't want something that's in between. I want, like, one or the other, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely feel you on that one. Usually I don't remember the episode titles, but I'll remember when the episode starts playing, what the episode's about and what's going to happen. So I don't remember this. Oh, I just remembered what the season finale's about. So live on air. But I don't think you'll be disappointed if that's what you're looking for.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that next week. I'm very excited to talk about it.
So excited.
This episode was pretty good. It wasn't, like, spectacular, but it definitely was remarkably solid. I'll give it that. It was, like, a very just good episode of MASH.
Definitely. All right, so just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Freer-Balco for being our technical consultant, Melissa, my sister, for cover art, and of course, our listeners. Thank you so much. Our music, social media, and contacts for the show are linked in the description, as always. And until next time, don't rip up your poker IOUs until you're absolutely sure the war is over. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.